Could Gon become a Nen Specialist when he makes his return to Hunter x Hunter? Let's talk about it. First of all, y'all, I want to give a special shout out to Aaron who sent in some support and asked me about this. And as you can see here, Aaron didn't say that he thinks Gon would specifically become a specialist, but he just wanted to know if I thought Gon could change his affinity after everything that happened to him. But this whole idea of Gon becoming a specialist has been a long-running theory and idea in the community, so that's kind of where I'm going to base this discussion around, but let's get into it. So before we get into Gon specifically, we kind of need to lay the foundation for how Nen affinities work. And as I'm sure you'll recall, there are 6 different affinities that you are born with. We've got enhancement, transmutation, conjuration, emission, manipulation, and specialist. And as you can see on this example graph here, don't pay too much attention to the percentages because this is for a specific person, not everybody. But as you can see, specialist is 0%. And that's because it's more so the exception to the rule or the anomaly amidst the system as opposed to a standard portion of it. Most people are born into one of these 5 categories, and it's those anomalies that can't be placed otherwise that go into specialist. Now, there are very rare occasions where somebody who was born a manipulator could become a specialist, and that's kind of the example we're going to be talking about in this video as it relates to Gon. But before we get there, just remember that typically how this works is that where you fall on the scale, in this case, we have an example of a conjurer, the other categories that you are closest to are the ones you're going to be better at. As you can see, a conjurer is going to be good at transmutation because it's close on the wheel, and they're going to be bad at emission because it's literally the furthest away. However, specialist, again being an anomaly, does not follow these rules. It's 0% even though it is the closest to conjuration, and that's because it just does not operate the same way, right? You have to either be born a specialist or be the super unique rare situation where you become one. Then and only then can you use specialist Nen. So all of this was actually explained to us in the manga through the lens of Kurapika, and that is actually his Nen diagram that we've been looking at, because as you can see, he is a natural-born conjurer, which means he is only one step away from specialist. And it's actually Kurapika's mentor that goes on to explain you either have to be born a specialist or be that rare case that becomes one later in life. And he goes on to say that it has typically been conjurers and manipulators that they've seen become specialists later in life, and that's probably because they are the closest to specialist on the Nen diagram. Now, as we all know, Kurapika is one of these extremely rare cases where he shifted from his natural born affinity to that of specialist, but importantly, he was a conjurer, which is only one step away. So hopefully everyone's with me so far, because we got even more information about how all of this works a couple of years ago from Togashi during a Hunter x Hunter exhibition, where he went more in depth on Nen affinities and how they work. And I know this is really small and you're not going to be able to read it, so I will read the important parts here. Togashi says that everyone is born with one fixed Nen type. However, there exist Nen users who, in terms of talent, are placed right between 2 Nen types, their natural born one and another one. And these types of users can efficiently learn or pick up both types of Nen. So here we have an example of this chart, right? And we've got a bunch of different people that are representative of those different classifications. Now, as you can see, there are also people placed between the lines, and these are the people that Togashi was just talking about. Now, what's important to remember is that these people aren't like dual Nen types. They weren't born with 2 innate types. You are still only born with one. That's not changing. There just exist some people who have a natural kind of leaning or talent towards another as well. And speaking of Kurapika, he is our prime example here. As you can see, his dot is right between conjurer and specialist. So Kurapika is a natural born conjurer still, 100%, but he just has the natural leaning talent that also puts him towards specialist. And so it might be that any conjurer or manipulator that ever became a specialist later in life was someone like Kurapika, was somebody that was in the middle of this spectrum as opposed to at either end. Meaning that it may take a very specific circumstance to be able to become a specialist. You might have to fall on either this line or this line. And if that's the case, then any emitter, enhancer, or transmuter could never become a specialist because it would be physically impossible for them to be on the spectrum between their innate and specialist, if that makes sense. I know that was really wordy, but Togashi kind of doubles down on this where he talks about the different types of nin and says that the one you are born in can never change. However, there exists extremely rare circumstances wherein a user can change to specialization. So, how loose is that rule? Is it defined by people like Kurapika, or is it truly an anomaly where somebody like Gon could jump all the way over? And so now let's take a look at Gon. Let's remind ourselves why we're even considering this, and that's because of the unique situation he's in right now. I'm not going to give you the full play-by-play of what happened to him, but after the Chimera Ant arc, he can't release his aura anymore. He essentially doesn't have Nin. That's just a colloquial way of saying it. I know some people get in the comments when I use that phrasing, but it's the same phrasing Gon uses, so, argue with the wall. But he still has aura. All living things have aura, so he didn't, lose that, but he just can't release it anymore. He basically can't use it. And seeing as Nin is the practice of using and wielding your aura, he lost his Nin, right? He can't use his Nin. Now, we don't know why this is the case, at least not explicitly, but it's obviously tied to his entire, contract he made in that fight with Pito. So Gon is a bit lost right now. This is why he has returned home. He's just catching up on his schoolwork and he's not doing hunter stuff. But again, assuming Togashi's health remains good enough for him to continue Hunter x Hunter, Gon will clearly be back. So if and when he does gain new control over his aura, might his Nin affinity shift? Could this be one of those ultra rare cases that would lead to something like that? Well, let's take a look at all this. Gon is an enhancer. That was his natural born Nin affinity, so this is his Nin graph. 100% in enhancement, and we get a little bit weaker the more we step away, all the way to specialist at 0. But we know that specialist is 0 for everybody, so that's kind of meaningless. What's meaningful is the fact that he is literally as far as he could possibly be from specialization. So if you do need to be on the spectrum toward specialization, it's going to be impossible for Gon to make that transition. However, if that's not a requirement and it truly is an anomaly wherein everyone on the map has the chance of becoming a specialist, then it's at least possible. And we don't know which of those two scenarios it is. Based on the information we can actually point to, I would think it's the former, and you would need to be somebody like Kurapika or a manipulator that's skewed towards specialization, but the fact remains that we don't know that for sure. And according to the information we got from Togashi, Gon is basically smack dab in the middle on enhancement. He's not one of these people that leans 50% of the way towards another specialization, meaning I don't see Gon becoming anything else besides a specialist, because like Togashi told us, again, it's too small for you to read, the affinity you are born with cannot change. So Gon's not going to be out here becoming a manipulator or a conjurer or anything like that. If he made a switch, the only possibility is specialist. But just to clarify here, and I don't want anybody arguing with me in the comments, there are people that are in between two specialists that could theoretically, master one or the other. But again, that doesn't mean they were born with two. They were still only born with one. And so Gon could lean into a mission or lean into transmutation if he wanted, but he would still be an enhancer. If he made a fundamental switch, specialization is the only possible choice. All right, now with all of that being said, do I think Gon could return as a Nin Specialist? And I think it's possible. Within the rules that Togashi has set up within this world, there at least exists the possibility of that happening. But personally, I don't think so. I think that it makes more sense that it would need to be somebody like Kurapika, like we've established. But beyond that, I just don't think it really makes sense narratively or for Gon's character. Gon isn't simple. I think he's a really interesting character, but he is simple in terms of his Nin and the direction Togashi is going with that. And we already have several specialists in the series, so I just don't think Togashi needs to dip back into that well with Gon. We already have that with Kurapika and Krollo and Saridnik and many others. So that's my take on it. I think it's possible. There's certainly interesting circumstances surrounding Gon's Nin right now, so maybe that's the direction Togashi's going. I personally just don't see the narrative reason to make Gon a specialist. But hey, Togashi is the GOAT, so if that's where he's going, I'm going to let him cook. But y'all let me know your thoughts on this. Again, shout out to Aaron, and thank you guys for watching.